So a new season of The Last of Us has begun streaming, and no matter what you think of the story so far, you have to admit that from a VFX standpoint, this season has been absolutely on point. From the seamless integration of 3D infected to the overgrown cities, everything looks absolutely stunning. But today I will be trying my VFX skills against the 742 amazing people at DNEG and try to recreate the bloater scene in only one day. Let's see how this goes. First of all, we need to make a 3D model of the bloater. I started with creating this basic human shape using cubes, and then I brought out my pen and tablet and started working on the sculpting. I like to view it kinda like painting, so first you need to lay out the basic shapes and then you can refine it more and more until you reach a final result. The bloater is basically just an infected person where the cordyceps has grown to create a sort of protective layer around the body, making it resistant to bullets and blunt force trauma. To help making these mushroom parts that stick out, I modeled one sort of mushroom shelf and then duplicated this on different parts of the model. Then I joined it all into one object and used the remesh modifier to merge it all together. I cleaned up the shapes a little bit and then exported this rough sculpt to a separate free software called Instant Meshes and used that to handle the read topology. Then I subdivided this clean mesh and started refining the shapes. And it was at this point where you really could start to see the bloater take shape with its iconic split head look. To speed up sculpting these blobs that grow all around the body of the bloater, I opened up a new Blender scene and created this custom brush texture by rendering it as a depth map. Then in my main scene I could use this to easily paint on this detail, and all I had to do after that was to clean it up a little bit by hand. Shortcuts like these really help you cut down on the time spent sculpting, and since I was going to get this done in one day, this was more than welcome. I want to take a quick moment to thank this video's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is the largest online community for creatives, and there are thousands of really high quality classes on everything from filmmaking and 3D visual effects to music production, writing, and even business and career related topics. Don't get me wrong, learning on YouTube can be awesome, I do it all the time, but sometimes it's nice to be able to just sit down with a course that takes you exactly where you want to go. It's especially useful for us Blender users, since learning a new software this complicated can be really hard. And I remember starting out and not really knowing where to begin. Skillshare solves this issue with step-by-step courses and learning paths made by professionals in the area where you want to learn. Skillshare is right now giving away a free month of full access for absolutely free to the first 500 people to go through the link in the description. So now is a great time to get started. Claim that free month now, and then when you have time, check out this awesome learning path by Alden Peters to get a huge learning boost in Blender visual effects creation. Big thanks to Skillshare for bringing this video to you. So now we have this really high poly detailed mesh, and it looks great, but trying to rig this as an animated character would be super slow because of the really dense detail. So we need to find a way to bake the high level detail onto a lower resolution mesh, so we still keep the look of the high detail without tanking our performance. The way this is usually done, both in games and VFX, is by using what's called a normal map. This basically fakes the look of a high poly mesh while keeping the polygon count low. Luckily, since we made sure the base mesh consisted of only quads or squares, we can use Blender's multi-resolution modifier to unsubdivide our high poly mesh until we get a poly count that is more reasonable for animation. Then we can UV unwrap this, and in the rendering tab we can bake the normals from the high poly version. As you can see, the illusion works really great because we can barely tell the difference between the high poly or low poly version. Now it was time to work on the other textures like the color and the roughness. I like to make it so that the crevices, like here and here for example, are more glossy, giving it a sort of disgusting moist look. To get that effect, I simply bake the ambient occlusion to a texture map and have that drive the roughness. And as you can see, it looks absolutely disgusting. To get some color onto him, I used the eyedropper tool to pick some colors from this reference image. This really helps keep the color palette looking coherent, especially for me who has red-green color blindness. I made the parts that stick out look a little bit more yellow, like a mushroom, and kept everything else as this red bluish, fleshy color. To finish off the material, I enabled subsurface scattering, which mimics the way light scatters in a semi-translucent material like skin. It creates this really organic look that works great for creature effects, especially when you hit it with a hard backlight. So you can see the light kind of shines through the flesh in a very realistic way. Animating humans, or zombies for that matter, in 3D takes a lot of time and skill that I don't have. Luckily, I have access to a motion capture suit from Rococo that records my movements in real time and feeds that into the capture software. This way I can simply get into the suit, hit record, act out the movement that I want, and have a really solid animation to work on. Then I just bring that into Cascador to do any cleanup work that has to be done, like correcting the center of mass or fixing the feet to the floor, and there's my final animation. One of the things that bothered me from a realism standpoint with this scene was how the flamethrowers worked. In reality, flamethrowers work by using compressed gas to propel a liquid fuel, which is then ignited and basically splashes onto whatever it is aimed at. Think of it as a water gun but with gasoline. This means that in reality the flames can shoot up to 40 meters away, creating a kind of stream of burning liquid fuel. This would obviously have been ridiculously dangerous for the set of The Last of Us, so they probably had to settle for this tamer version that just shoots burning gases instead of liquid. It looks stunning, but it doesn't really do justice to the power of real flamethrowers. But since I'm doing everything in 3D, and the only thing that will be burning is my computer while rendering, I can create something that closer resembles the effect that a real flamethrower would have. My idea here was to use a particle system to act as the liquid fuel, and then use that particle system to drive the smoke and fire simulation. To get the fire to stick a little bit more to the bloater, I used dynamic paint to mask out the parts that were touched by the fuel or the particles, and then had that act as a secondary fuel source in the simulation. Once the fire simulation was baked, I made this simple fire shader that helps bring out the detail in the flames and emits light in a realistic way. This was barely noticeable at all, but I made the snow on the ground deform as the bloater stepped on it using dynamic paint. Then to give the animation a little bit more weight and realism, I did some secondary motion using a cloth simulation to act as the muscles and skin jiggling around with the movement. I have an in-depth tutorial on creating muscle simulations like this on my Patreon if you're interested. I didn't really have time to create a detailed environment, so instead I got these assets off of Sketchfab and just kit bashed it into a simple town background. This was gonna be covered in fog and blurred by the depth of field anyways, so no need to waste time here. After putting everything together, the character animation, the environment, and finally the fire simulation, this was the final result. I think this experiment shows that with modern tools, it's possible to create VFX shots that work pretty quickly, but to reach the level of polish that we expect from movies and high-end TV series, it takes a lot more time and potentially many artists working together. I think DNEG wins this one, but I'm happy with what I was able to create in such a short time. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.